So I worked out recently that I've seen over 50,000 patients in my career so far. And after a while, you start to see things that the textbooks don't really prepare you for, patterns that you start to notice again and again. And the pattern I keep seeing isn't really about the emergencies themselves, it's about what came before those emergencies. The patients we see in AAND with serious medical problems like heart attacks and strokes and heart failure, kidney failure, diabetic problems, the vast majority of these patients are over the age of 50. And that is not surprising on its own, because as we get older, things go wrong, our bodies age. But what really bothers me the longer I work in emergency medicine, and really is the reason why I started this channel, is how often we'll run the tests. We'll look at the results and realize that whatever brought this patient in has clearly been developing for years and years, sometimes a decade or more, and nobody has caught it. Or if they had, nobody has acted on it. Modern medicine is amazing. We can do amazing things, but we are terrible at preventing things from happening in the first place. If you're new here, then hello, my name is Alex. I'm an emergency medicine doctor, and my mission these days is to help people from ever ending up in the AAND in the first place, and to teach you everything I know about how to stay healthy and prevent disease. And if you'd like to support what I'm doing here, then the best thing that you can do is like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really does make a massive difference. And only about a quarter of people who watch these videos are subscribed, so please help me out. Show your support, and I'll keep making these videos for you to help as many people as possible. Anyway, what I want to do in this video today is talk about 6 things, 6 numbers, 6 markers that I think everyone should be checking every single year. Not because I want to sort of medicalize your life or turn you into somebody who's really anxious about their health. The opposite. Actually, the whole point of longevity, the thing that the people who live longest tend to have in common, is that they've had the least input with their doctor over their lifetime. Not because they've been lucky, but because they've looked after themselves well enough that serious intervention was rarely needed. It's a bit like a car. If you do the OT every single year, if you check the oil and you pay attention to the warning lights and you deal with the small things before they become big things, then that car will last far longer than one that only ever sees a mechanic when something has already gone wrong. I hope that makes sense. Your body is very similar, and the 6 things I'm going to talk about today are like your dashboard. The thing is, most of these patients I talk about hadn't just been completely fine and then suddenly collapsed. They'd had symptoms, they'd felt a bit off, they felt tired in a way that felt a bit different for a long time. They felt breathless doing things that didn't used to make them breathless, or they felt a bit foggy or, odd sensations in their hands or feet that they couldn't quite explain. And almost universally, they'd put it down to getting older, which is completely understandable because when symptoms come on very gradually over months or years, your brain adjusts to them. They become your new normal. And the thing is, you've only ever lived in your own body. You don't have another version of yourself to compare all of these symptoms to. You don't know whether the tidness you feel is just what a 55-year-old tidness feels like, or whether it's a sign that something else has been quietly going wrong for the past 3 or 5 years. So what is actually going on with these patients? What are we seeing when we do these tests? Well, a lot of the time it comes down to one of a handful of things, or more often a combination of them, and none of them are expensive or complicated. They are things that can be measured with a simple test, often at home. And the first one I want to talk about is blood pressure, because it's the one that surprises most people when I talk about what it actually does to your body over time. So high blood pressure is sometimes called the silent killer, which sounds a bit like a cliche until you've watched what it does to people in their 60s and 70s and beyond. The reason it's silent is that it genuinely doesn't feel like anything for a very long time. Your blood vessels are under higher pressure than they should be, essentially day after day, year after year, and they are quietly being damaged by it. The walls of the arteries and veins thicken and stiffen. The heart has to work harder to push blood through them. And what that means is that the small vessels in your brain and your kidneys and your eyes get gradually damaged, and then one day, without warning, something gives way. Something happens, like a vessel in the brain ruptures or blocks, or in the heart, exhausted from years of overwork, starts to fail, and that's what we see in heart failure. Or a kidney that has been struggling for a decade tips into serious dysfunction. And we see these sorts of things in AANDE all the time, and we look at their history and their blood pressure has been elevated for years. This is what we see most of the time. Sometimes they knew about their blood pressure and they weren't really treated properly. Sometimes they had no idea at all because they'd never had it checked. The thing is, a home blood pressure monitor costs less than 20 quid, 30 quid, and it gives you one of the most important numbers that you can know. Your blood pressure is something that everybody needs to monitor. You're looking for something consistently around 120/80 or below. unless you are particularly elderly and frail, in which case we like a bit of a higher blood pressure just to sort of prevent any falls from, a postural drop or anything like that. Anything regularly over 130 over 85, if you're not frail, is worth taking really seriously and discussing with your doctor, because even just mildly elevated pressure can do real damage if it's sustained over decades. Number 2 on the list, right alongside blood pressure, is something else that we always pick up, which is a high resting heart rate. So people don't really tend to think about this one. But a resting heart rate that's consistently elevated, sitting sort of above around 80 beats per minute, certainly above 90, and we do see this as a really important signal. It often reflects a heart and cardiovascular system that is under strain, a nervous system that's stuck in a low-level state of stress or underlying metabolic dysfunction as well. A healthy resting heart rate sits somewhere between 50 and 70 for most people. Mine is around 45, and I've seen a resting heart rate in the high 30s as well. This guy was in his 50s, and he was an Ironman triathlete. So all of the alarm bells went off and everybody came running, and he was the fittest guy you've ever seen. He just had an ankle injury, and you can measure this yourself right now if you don't have a smartwatch. So just put 2 fingers on the inside of your wrist over your radial artery and count the number of beats for 30 seconds and then double it. If that number is higher than you'd like it to be, so if it's higher than 80, then it's worth paying attention to. Most smartwatches and fitness trackers will measure this continuously and then give you a really good resting average, which is even more useful than a single reading. The third one in this video today is your kidney function, and we check this well, to be honest, in most patients in the AANDE, and it's one that most people never really think about until something goes wrong, and by that point it's been declining for years and years. Your kidneys are doing a massive amount of work every single day, filtering your blood, regulating your blood pressure, managing fluid balance, getting rid of waste products, and they are delicate. They are vulnerable to high blood pressure, to high blood sugar, to inflammation, to certain medications. The problem is that the kidneys are remarkably good at compensating. You can lose a significant proportion of your kidney function and feel basically nothing. No symptoms, no warning, nothing that would make you pick up the phone and call your doctor. And we see patients all the time who come in with something that looks unrelated, like breathlessness or nausea or confusion, and we run a basic blood test for this patient, and then we find that their kidney function is severely impaired. They have kidney failure, and when we dig deeper into the history, the signs had been there on previous blood tests from the GP, quietly getting worse for years without anybody putting the pieces together. So much of this is just put down to aging, and this is wrong. This is one that you actually do need a blood test for. It's called your EGFR, estimated glomerular filtration rate, but it is a standard part of any basic blood panel that your doctor can arrange really easily. And you can also get it done privately as well if you're struggling with that. It might cost, 50, 100 quid, but if you do that once a year, it's really worth doing. Now, your triglycerides and LDL cholesterol are another piece of this puzzle. And I want to be careful here because the conversation around cholesterol has been sort of quite noisy recently and, to be honest, very confusing. I did a video recently on statins that has become quite popular, and I'd recommend checking that out if you're confused about whether to take a statin or not. What the evidence consistently shows is that elevated LDL cholesterol and chronically high triglycerides, and I'm talking about the stuff on just a standard blood panel at the moment, these are really meaningful contributors to cardiovascular disease over a long time. They are part of the process that leads to plaques building up inside your artery walls, the process that eventually causes heart attacks and strokes. And again, you feel none of this happening. There are no symptoms of high triglycerides. There are no warning signs of an elevated LDL sitting in your blood. It is invisible until the consequences aren't. And again, this is just a really cheap, easy blood test that we do all the time that your GP should be able to do for you. And if you can't get it through your GP, then go privately. The next one on this list is all about your blood sugar. And this is the one that most people underappreciate, but it's the one that you can fix most easily. So we run a random glucose test on most patients in the AANDE. And very often we find it is elevated, not sort of diabetic level necessarily, but higher than it should be. And then what we do, either on the ward or sometimes in the AANDE as well, we run an HbA1c or A1c if you're in America, which is a test that shows your average blood sugar over the past 2 to 3 months, not just what it is at this exact moment right now, and that often is elevated as well. And what this tells you is that somebody's blood sugar has been running high consistently for months or even years, to be honest. Not just spiking occasionally in response to a sugary meal or refined carbs, but chronically elevated day after day. And that is the environment in which blood vessels become damaged, where your nerves get damaged, where your kidneys and your heart get damaged as well. A healthy HbA1c sits below 42 if you're in the UK or below 5.7% if you're in America. But really, the lower the better. And this is something you can address really easily with walking after meals and trying to include as much fiber and protein and roughage in everything you eat. And finally, the last test on the list today is your LFT, liver function test. And again, this is a really cheap test that we do all the time for most patients that come through the doors. And what we find again and again is that, these tests are quietly abnormal in people who had no idea at all. And the most common reason for this is fatty liver disease, which is becoming increasingly common these days. We see it all the time. And this is almost entirely driven by diet and your metabolic health and your activity levels. So too much sugar, too many refined carbohydrates, too little movement, and the liver starts accumulating fat. This does not hurt. It doesn't cause any noticeable symptoms. It just quietly becomes less efficient over time and more inflamed and more damaged over time. And a damaged liver affects everything. It affects your cholesterol, your blood sugar regulation, your hormones, your ability to process medication properly. It is really important. A liver function test is just a standard cheap test that your GP can arrange for you, or if you're having problems, it is again a test that you can get privately. And it's worth saying I don't get any money or benefit from suggesting that. In an ideal world, our doctors would just do this for us every year to try and prevent things in the future. But that is another story. Now, if your results come back with erased LT or AST, which are enzymes that leak into the blood when liver cells are under stress, then clearly that is something that needs addressing properly with a doctor's appointment, where they examine you, they take a thorough history, and probably some imaging as well, probably an ultrasound. And this brings me to the final point in this video, and it's worth saying that this isn't meant to scare you. It is meant to say that we have the tools available to see things coming. The technology exists right now to measure the things that matter: blood pressure, resting heart rate, HbA1c, kidney function, triglycerides, LDL, and liver function tests, and to catch problems while they're still problems rather than after they've become catastrophes. Think about how most people treat their car. They have a regular out, they have regular oil checks. Warning lights are taken seriously. You wouldn't drive a car for 10 years without ever looking under the bonnet and then act surprised when the engine fails. That just doesn't happen. But that's essentially what most of us are doing with our bodies. Most of us wait until something goes wrong badly enough to end up in the emergency department, and then we're shocked to find out it's been building since our mid-40s or early 30s or whatever. Most people assume that we go through life healthy. Then we age and something bad happens. But that's not the case. Some of these tests your GP can do for you. And I would really hope that if you're trying to prevent illness and really take charge of your health, that your doctor would do these for you. Go out and buy a blood pressure machine and actually check your blood pressure regularly. Get an average and track it over time, and buy a smartwatch as well. You can get a smartwatch for less than 20 or 30 these days. And not only does it check your resting heart rate, but many of them measure your steps per day, your sleep score, and your V2 max as well. It gives you so much information. Now, all of these tests are extraordinarily valuable, not because you'll necessarily find something wrong, but because knowing your numbers means you have a baseline for where you are right now. You know where you stand, and if something starts to shift over time, then you can catch it early, when the window to act is wide open rather than nearly closed, which is what we see in recess. Just remember that the symptoms of chronic disease are very subtle. They are sneaky. They feel like normal life, like getting older, like nothing in particular, like the tiredness that you assume is just stress, or breathlessness that you put down to being a bit out of shape maybe, or your memory that feels slightly less sharp than it was a couple of years ago, like tingling in your feet that comes and goes. That could be diabetes. These things feel really unremarkable because they arrive over years. Your brain just adapts to them. And because you've only ever been you, you don't have another body to compare it to see if this is normal, if that makes sense. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the only way to know what's going on is to measure it properly and regularly, like it matters, because it does matter. Very often, your life will depend on these numbers at some point. The vast majority of what I see at work in the hospital is entirely preventable. It is not inevitable. It is not just a part of getting older. It is the end result of a process that has been running for years and years, but very often visible in the numbers if anyone had actually looked at them. Now, I'm not trying to blame anybody here. It's not about people doing something wrong. It is about a system that is brilliant at treating crises and genuinely very poor at preventing them in the first place, Which means if prevention is going to happen, a lot of it has to come from you. You cannot rely on the healthcare system to keep you healthy. And that is a really sad thing to say. You've got to know your numbers. You've got to treat your health like the most important thing you maintain, because it is. The people who live the longest, the healthiest, and the most independently, they are not the ones who spent the most time in their doctor's surgery or in the hospital. They are the ones who rarely needed to see their doctor. They are the ones who prevented these things from happening in the first place. Now, I'm trying to keep this video as short as possible, because really what this video is just giving you a starting point, a set of signals worth paying attention to. And there are so many other videos on this channel that go much deeper into specific parts of this, whether that's blood sugar or cardiovascular health, or kidney function, or blood pressure, or what to actually do about any one of those numbers. So if something here has resonated, then there is a lot more to explore on the rest of the channel. What I would say is this: each of these markers that I've mentioned today is pointing at something. A high resting heart rate might be telling you something about your fitness or your breathing, or how much chronic stress your body is carrying. A raised HbA1c is almost always pointing at your diet and how sedentary your life has become. Elevated triglycerides often reflect the same thing as well. A poor kidney function might be pointing at your blood pressure or your blood sugar. And again, your liver function is almost always about your metabolic health, which is again about what you're eating and how much you're moving. Now, none of these numbers exist in isolation, and none of them are a diagnosis on their own. They are just signals. And the whole point is that signals, if caught early enough, give you time to do something about them before they become the kind of emergency that ends up walking through my doors at work. And if any of these tests come back abnormal, or if your blood pressure or resting heart rate is a little high, then clearly what you need is a sit-down appointment with your doctor who examines you thoroughly and takes a thorough history. This is the bare minimum. This is what you deserve. I really hope you found this video useful today. If you did, then please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what you'd like me to focus on next time.